So welcome everybody to the Maine Women Writers Collection. I'm Kathleen Miller, I'm the curator here, and I'm really glad to have you all with us today. It's a little cozy situation here, so if people need a little space, there are chairs on the outside too. We're happy to have Dr. Danielle Wozniak who's the director of the School of Social Work, joining us today. And her research passions include the culture of motherhood and kinship through US-based foster care. I look forward to hearing you talk
Great.
today, and we'll just...
Super. So let me just start by talking with you about how I got into this kind of work, and then I'll talk a little bit about what the work is. I talk very quickly, and if I'm going too fast, I want you just to go like this, and that will be my sign to slow down. I am a social worker who spent 10 years working with children and families in public schools. And then I'm also an anthropologist who spent 10 years researching different types of mothering and families through US-based fosterage. For a long time, I kept those two professions very separate, and I was really quite distinct about today I'll put on my social work hat, and then today, researcher, anthropologist hat. In one of those anthropologist hat modes, I began to do some research on women's sexuality. I thought, frankly, that it would be some easy research. I had a baby on my hip, and I had another one in preschool, and I was being a full-time mom, and I wanted to keep my hand in with research. And I thought, this will be a light kind of foray into research, and we'll take a look at women's access to resources and how that has changed intimate decision-making. Right as I got into it and assembled a team to go out and do some interviews, our easy peasy lemon squeezy research took a dogleg into violence. Over half of the women that we were interviewing, and we did a snowball sample on the eastern seaboard from Connecticut to, I think, down to New Jersey, I think, or Delaware, maybe. It was all along the eastern seaboard. We reached out, and we were finding that about 51% of our population, women, talked about their encounters with violence in a domestic and intimate setting. To be frank with you, when I first began, I didn't want to find out about violence. I had these cute little babies, and I was having a great time in motherhood, and all of a sudden I was really called up short to get back into the field and to say, we have a serious, serious problem here. While we were trying to see the scope of the violence so that we could make some statements about generalizabilities about who was being violated, when and by whom, and what was happening, a little pearl of research wisdom came out, and that is the researchers would come to my house on Friday afternoons to report about the interviews that they did for the week and to go over what their findings were, and then I would take their tapes then to the transcriptionist to have those tapes transcribed, and then we would code their interviews. One by one, the interviewers were mentioning almost as an afterthought, oh, by the way, there was one woman I talked to today who said that she had been in a violent relationship, but she's not anymore. And at first I thought, okay, well, that's good, I'll take a look at that transcript. But then I learned to ask more questions about those particular interviews because something was happening. The first thing that occurred to me was the language that women were using when they described what had happened to their lives or the changes. They used past tense language, and there was quite a demarcation that they would talk about. They would say, I used to be in a violent relationship, but I'm in a great relationship now. That was my former life. In my former life, it was almost as though they were describing a new life that happened when they got out of that violent relationship and began again. There was something else about those women that I thought was really important, and that was they didn't talk about themselves in relation to their violence. In fact, we would not have known that these women had been violated had we not been doing this type of an interview. They would say things like, "Hi, I'm Susan, I'm an attorney, and I'm happy to do this interview," and then would talk. And then as we got into the interview, they would talk about their experiences with violence, always in that past tense. That was really different from what I was hearing from women in my volunteer work at the Battered Women's Shelter. These were women who were very much involved in violence. They identified as victims, and then I'll talk to you in just a second about those women who identified as survivors. I paid very close attention to this subset that was coming up, but I didn't know how to find them. I couldn't predict where they were or who they were, but I did listen to what had helped their journey out of violence. And there were about 4 or 5 factors. One was somebody, first of all, an opportunity to tell their story and to be believed. The other was we called her a strong woman, but it wasn't always a woman. It was someone who said, you don't have to live like this. There is a different way. You can achieve that. The other thing that kept showing up in these women's interviews, oddly enough, was a police officer or someone in authority who, after they had been called to a house for a domestic disturbance, oftentimes had arrested the perpetrator, was taking that person out, and turned around almost by accident and said, "Lady, you deserve better than this," and walked out to process the case. That stuck with women and was a turning point for them. And so what I began to see was that there were a series of turning points that women had between a police officer or someone in authority saying you don't have to put up with this, the realization that there was another way of living and that they actually could obtain it. And then there were some other steps that took them along their journey. So I went to the literature, the social work literature, and said, well, this has got to be documented somewhere. And I thought, gosh, it's not. We do a fabulous job with crisis intervention. We have shelters, we have ERs. At my own physicians, there were all sorts of little sticky posters up. If someone's violating you, tell somebody. I mean, so the PSAs on TV was great. But then what? And then I looked a little deeper into community services in my area, and I saw, well, there are some intermediate groups. There are support groups offered at the Y, oftentimes offered through the Battered Women's Shelter. And so I began as a researcher to attend those support groups. And there I heard women talk about themselves as a survivor, really as a badge, right? They had been through it. What was happening in those support groups, though, was hugely concerning to me. Women were going around in a circle and were telling their stories in absolute technicolor detail, their stories of violation. And I took another colleague of mine who was also an anthropologist. Both of us left one meeting, and I'm going to tell you, we were traumatized by the vivid images that we had heard that night. And I said, I'll bet this is just like a one-off. This is just a one-time thing. I'll bet they move past this, but I'll bet they have to tell their story. So we said, let's keep going back. And every night that we went, every week, we heard the same stories of traumatization. People were telling that they survived it. When they introduced themselves, they would say, I'm Anne, and I'm a survivor, or I'm Anne, and I'm a victim. And I just kept thinking, what comes next? What will you be next? If you're no longer a victim and you're no longer a survivor, what will you become? And I looked for services that guided women to that becoming place, and I just didn't find any. And so I thought, then we will create them. So, any questions thus far? It's a good story? Okay, good. I'll keep going then. So, I was on the board of directors for a battered women's shelter, and every month that I went to board meetings, the director of that organization, it was a battered women's shelter and a transitional housing facility, she complained bitterly about the women from the transitional housing facility. And she said, these women have low rent, almost non-existent rent for 2 years, And it's their time to really put themselves together in a whole new way and really get out there and heal and become, like take advantage of this opportunity, go back to school, whatever. And they're not doing anything. They won't keep the house clean. They don't meet with each other. They close the doors. The only thing we can do is to mandate that they attend self-esteem and parenting classes. And even if mandated, we have to threaten them. So at first I thought, why would you mandate a self-esteem class? And I mean, really, why would you do that? I puzzled all the way home about that one. And then I also puzzled about, so does living there make you a bad parent? So does everyone just need a mandated parenting class? And what message is that sending about your deficits if you have to be in a self-esteem class so we can teach you how to feel better about yourself and teach you how to be a better mom? The subtext I thought was still really violating. And so I thought there was a problem with that. While I was mulling over this problem, I also encountered a friend of mine. I'm not sure how I met this woman. Her name is Eileen, and she is a heroin addict in recovery. And she got out of prison, had hit rock bottom. She had gotten out of prison. She was working with women by renting beautiful, beautiful houses in rural, pastoral locations in Connecticut. And she took donations for furniture, but she only took exquisitely beautiful furniture. And when women got out of prison, they could stay there for the first 2 weeks absolutely rent-free. Just get yourself reacclimated, sorted out. You had to go to a meeting. 90-90 was her rule, so 90 meetings, AA or NA, in 90 days. Most of these women were in recovery and struggling to stay in recovery. And that was the only other rule she had. After 2 weeks, she'd hoped that they would help, the other women would help you get connected to a job or to other resources so that you could contribute to the rent and pay for the next woman getting out of prison. You could stay there as long as you needed to. There were no limits. I started hanging out in Irene's house, and something was really occurring to me that I had never seen in my social service career. First of all, the women in this house absolutely adored her. She was a no-nonsense kind of a gal. If she suspected that you were using, she called you and said, "I love you to death, I'd love you to stay, but you can't because you're using, and so I need to have you go, but come back when you're ready, we'll be waiting for you." She also allowed the women to just grow and be and maximize their potential. A shameful story about my own self is I was working with a woman in her house, volunteering, and I used a clinical label when talking about this woman. And my friend said, "She's not a borderline, she's Donna." And I thought, note to self, when we label people, we distance ourselves, and her gift is that she doesn't. So I asked her if I could work with her women in the house. I said, I'm not going to hurt anybody, but I might help too. And I saw that these women were making huge life transitions. I also saw that they could not get any lower than where they started from. They were out of prison, they had prison records, they had lost their licenses permanently through repeat DUIs. Most of them had had their children taken from them and terminated their parental rights. Most of their families had severed all ties. These were women who had only one direction to go, and that was up. And I wondered if I could work with them to help in that journey. I had no idea what I was doing, except that I thought I could, in fact, bring something to the table, and I was really curious about this journey to move from being a survivor, because they had survived a lot, to being something else, a thriver. My first work with them was pretty difficult, but it was also guided by the two anthropologists, Arnold van Gennep and Victor Turner. These guys went cross-culturally and looked at transition rights. How do people in non-Western society move from one stage of life to another stage of life? And how is that regarded by the community? We have very few transition rights in our own culture. And so I began to think that when we go from being a victim or a survivor of violation, that maybe we need a transition right to help us mark the moment that we say, okay, I'm done with that, and now I'm going to become something else. And the one thing that these anthropologists noted is that it has to be socially validated, so that the whole community to which you belong must also see that you've made this transition, affirm that, and now relate to you in a new role. How different would it be if women became thrivers and demanded that kind of interaction from other people? And the problem is that often in social services, we actually require people to label themselves in a problematic way, right? So if you're thriving, we're probably not going to give you a lot of social service help, right? So in order to get access to social services that they may still need, they had to label themselves through a pathology or a problem. So I thought that's a problem that we'll have to work out. I began to work with the women in Eileen's house. The thing that happened sort of by accident was that in order to create and to become something new, you really had to use your imagination. You had to use your abilities to generate, or generativity, to generate something new, to be the creator. And I felt like there was a metaphor happening. If you could create something that was really lovely, could that be a metaphor for your life? Could you then in your life create something that was good? I was at a birthday party. I was standing next to this huge cupcake tree that the hostess had put together, thinking, which one could I take without the hostess realizing that I had done it? And a man came up to stand beside me. I figured he was probably thinking the same thing. We started to talk. He was a third grade art teacher, sweet guy. And we started talking with each other about what we did, and I told him I was working at Eileen's house volunteering, and he said, I'd love to go with you sometime. And I thought, gosh, I wonder how the women would relate to this. And I said, what could you do? And he said, we could do an art project. I was not working full time. I did not have a lot of resources. Dan and I went to the dollar store and got tinfoil pans, and we got tempura paint and a lot of Crisco oil. And I went to Yukon where I was adjuncting and nicked a ream of paper. And we went to Irene's house that night, and Dan said, I've got a great activity. It's how to make stained glass out of paper. And you take a piece of paper like this, you wad it up, you fold it up, you can write on it, you can do it all sorts of, and you dip it in the paint. And then we put out New York Times on the floor, and they had them and dried. And something happened for those women that night. It was magical, and I wrote about it in several articles. That when we debriefed, when we processed with before we debriefed, the women, first of all, their entire affect changed. They went from that sort of prison acceptable affect of really blank, blunted expressions, no direct gaze, to becoming really animated with their facial expressions, with their gestures, with their talk. I actually heard laughter. People looked at each other directly. And oftentimes there can be competition for resources between women. This time I heard women complimenting each other. Wow, that looks so cool. How'd you do that? I want to try that. So we had this evening, and then the energy had so shifted in that house that night that I debriefed with them and said, what was that like for you? And one woman said, everything I have ever created in my whole life has been shit. This is the first time I made something beautiful. And I just thought, oh my God, we stumbled on something amazing. And the women, after the papers were dry, ran to their bedrooms. The space that they owned in this house was right above their beds, and they had posted those beautiful stained glass pictures above their bed. And we used that as a metaphor for the rest of my work with them, that you can create something beautiful. And then we began to do some projective dreaming and envisioning. And if you were a friend of mine with just a microcosm of talent, I pulled you into this house and said, what can you offer? My friend was a psychologist, did a lot of meditations and daydreams. And so began my work creating a curriculum for women in their journey from becoming survivors to thrivers. At the same time, I thought, okay, these women, these are tough women, but they also have Irene, and she's their backbone. What about women who don't have that? So I went to the Battered Women's Shelter, where I was on the board, and I said, I'd like to work with the women here in the transitional housing. Those women filed in. They would not look at each other. In fact, everyone wanted to sort of melt into the background. They had really blunted expressions, and they had been told by the staff that this was a mandatory group. Yet another mandatory group in how to feel good, damn it. So the first thing I said is, this is not mandatory. Come if you want to. I'd love to have you, but don't feel like you have to. And do you know that I had 100% attendance for 10 weeks? So in that group, I really began to assemble the pieces of the curriculum. The things that I put together are not rocket science. I pulled them from every corner of the world that I had heard about. My husband was a tribal archaeologist for the Mohegan tribe. I met with the Mohegan elders to see what they were doing in their healing groups with their elders, especially as they worked around substance abuse. So I pulled from all sorts of resources and put it together in my curriculum. The one thing that seemed to really make a difference was the order in which the events or when the activities took place. And so today I kind of want to walk you through a few of the activities, let you experience what they're like, and then tell you why it is that they are important. So the curriculum that I put together is a 10-week curriculum, and it walks women who do not know each other through the sort of the stages of healing that I had outlined and had identified in my own research. The one thing I never, ever, ever did in my groups was I never asked women to identify as someone who had been battered or violated, and I never asked women to talk about the violation. In fact, I outlawed it. I said, actually, you're already an expert in the violence and the violation that has marked your life. And hopefully you've had a chance to talk about that. And if you haven't, this probably isn't the group for you. But if you have had a chance to talk about it, what we're going to discover together is what comes next. That part of your life that you're not yet an expert in, but that your expertise must now grow. And so what do you think the reaction was when I would say that on the first day of group? What do you think would happen? Absolutely. The entire group would go like this. Oh, God, yes. And so we just worked with that momentum. And I talked with them a little bit about how we go through stages in our life, and we have turning points, and that I had identified them in my own life, those moments when things had irrevocably changed, sometimes for the worse, often for the better, and that we were going to look at those turning points and create some turning points as we went through our journey together. So, how does that sound thus far? Does it make sense? Okay, would you like to try an activity? All right, good. The first activity that we did when we began our groups was to make a collage. So we have a lot of material in front of you, and I'm going to suggest that we do that same collage. Now, the activities are fairly structured at the start, and they become a little bit less structured as we go through. So this collage is not a free-form one. This is a collage where you're going to select a piece of paper, any color you want, and on that paper, you're going to write a quote from Maya Angelou. And the quote is, "Surviving is important. Thriving is elegant." Mm-hmm. Then you're going to make a collage that fits with your life and that quote. Now, before we get started, the other thing that we do is, when you're battered in a battering relationship and are just coming from that battering relationship, what has happened to your body? Yeah, you've been really battered and you've shut down, hunkered down, learned how to protect. Oftentimes, because women's bodies have been used as a punching bag, it's not a safe place to get to that body. And so I do successive approximations to help women climb back into that body. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is just a very brief 10-second activity just to get you into your body. So get comfortable. Close your eyes and put your hand on the flat of your tummy. Well, flat is relative. Close your eyes, and when you breathe, make your hand go in and out. Push that hand out and in. Take a deep breath. Let it out through your mouth. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in light. Breathe out stress. Breathe in love. Breathe out ease. Breathe in joy. Breathe out pink cake. All right, good. Non-threatening, very easy just to get tuned in. So I'd like you to go ahead and on each table you'll find a book of construction paper. Choose your color, and there are magazines. Feel free to move around, move about the cabin. The seatbelt sign is off. And on somewhere on that paper, just right, surviving is important, thriving is elegant. You want to do a collage? Okay. Are you ready for a seat? There's one right there. Oh, sure. Would you like to do a collage? You're just going to watch? Go ahead. Do you women want some paper? And we're going to share these collages for those who want to at the end.
Well, I don't know the red light.
Let's go to 1:30. A lot of people have to leave at 1. Surviving is important. Thriving is elegant. I wonder if we should do this one since so many people have that. Let's see. And I want you to know that usually I always make a collage with my group when I'm working. Can you all listen and do your creative work, or should I just wait? All right. Okay. So think about one of the hallmark features of a battering relationship. What does the batterer do in order to keep a woman in a powerless position? Control and isolation, right? So, women who have been isolated through a violent relationship sometimes have a hard time with something as minor as small talk. So one of the things that we did when I was running these groups is we would have dinner before we began, and we would engage in small talk. And small talk that was geared to help women connect with each other. And so my co-partner, usually a social work graduate student, and I would always create the opportunity for bridges. So if we heard someone say, "Oh, I got to go to the grocery store," we'd create a bridge between her and another woman about that topic. And so we just got women talking with each other. And so what started as fairly quiet activities like this one, very soon became much more talkative and interactive events because they were using a skill that they were developing. Does that make sense? Ordinarily, give you as long as you absolutely wanted to in order to create your perfection. What do you think this is doing for your brain? It's engaged. Yeah, right and left.
Left brain, right brain.
Left
Is that
brain.
what someone just said?
Yeah, yeah. Here's the other thing. In violating relationships, we're often reacting to someone else, and now we are acting on our own. And so this actually, on a neurological level, I really understand it as laying down new pathways, new ways of thinking about the world around me and myself in that world. Would anybody like to share their creation with the group, as in progress as it is? My group operated with was, if you can dream it, you can see it. If you can see it, you can get there. So you have essentially created that mental template of what thriving is, and included the feelings that go with that. That when I am thriving, I'm going to feel this way. And that's one of the ways I'm going to know that I'm there. Does that make sense? Great. So it's a lot about being agentive, or being an agent of our own self-change rather than reacting to other people. Now, I see people are still working. I wonder if you could flip your collages over, or just grab a little spare piece of paper. And I'd like you to do another little activity that I often do with women. And that is, you have been selected to win $5 million. There are no strings attached to this. It's your money. The only stipulation is you must spend it first on yourself. What are the first 3 things that you would do with your newly acquired $5 million? Write 3 things down. What was it like to think of 3 things that you could spend unlimited resources on? Easy? Nice? Hard? Sure. Right, right.
Well, I know, but I think the question was directly for you.
For you, right. Now, why would we do that? Why would we make the exercise that way? Why would we ask women that those first 3 things have to be on you? Why?
Care of other people, or you're not thinking.
Right, exactly. And so we really want to legitimate, it's okay to think of yourself. It's okay to take care of yourself. In fact, it's really important. And we also represent the idea that, we are so used to accepting the finiteness of our world. Told it is finite all the time. What if we were told that it is really infinite? What if we began to think of the world and the universe around us as an infinite and abundant place, rather than one of scarcity? And if we acted like that, what would change in our world for us? On that note, I'm going to say that we also deal with spirituality in this group, and we talk about abundance of the universe. And we also talk about angels that protect women, or whatever that divine being is that women themselves feel is important to them. So I end every group encounter with the opportunity to draw an angel card. So I'm going to share my angel cards. It's yours to keep, and we always say that we draw the ones that we need the most, or that are the most important for us at this moment. So I'll start over here. And see if that angel card is for you. If it's not 100% apparent right away,
You trade it in?
you can do anything you want. I will say, in in a very projective way. My 14-year-old drew a card and she said, "This must be a mistake." And I thought, yeah, no, it's not, but it is your card. I think the universe wanted you to have it, but your journey may be to accept the message that's on it. Here you go. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I also know that people have 1 o'clock gigs that they have to go off to. I'm also happy to stay and chat afterwards. But when we're done with all the angel cards, that'll be the last thing that we'll do. Oh, that's lovely. Keep them. It's yours. I'll go around this other way. Did anybody draw a card that was just right for them at this moment in time that they want to share? That was the card for you, I could tell. Okay.
I'm becoming in graduate school to become a counselor, and I'm starting to see clients in the fall, and I've just been freaking out about that a little bit and feeling like, what right do I have? Am I ready? Am I going to serve the clients well? And then this one is about you have the ability to counsel others.
Wow.
I have never known anyone to get a card that wasn't theirs. Take your collage, take your card.
I love my
You
card.
can stay after and finish your beautiful.
And good. And thank you so much for coming.